It was just another quiet morning in the small village nestled on the edge of the forest, where the mist still hung low over the trees, and the distant sound of birds slowly stirred the day to life. People were going about their routines, sweeping porches, boiling tea, feeding the livestock, unaware that something incredible was about to unfold just a few hundred meters away. What began as a regular morning would soon turn into a tense, heart-pounding rescue mission that no one would forget. A tiger, yes, a real wild tiger, was stuck in the most unexpected place, tangled in a mess of old tree fishing nets, high, up in the forest canopy. How it got there was a mystery. How it would get down. That was the challenge that would test everything. It all started with a strange noise that jolted a few villagers out of their regular rhythm. It wasn't the usual calls of the forest. It was something deeper. A growl, low and strained. At first, no one believed what they were hearing. Wild animals were common in this area, sure, but they rarely ventured close to human settlements, and certainly not into the trees. But this sound, this cry, wasn't normal. It carried something else with it: fear and pain. A couple of young men decided to follow the sound out of curiosity more than concern. They had no idea what they were walking into. Pushing past thick undergrowth. Stepping over roots and dry leaves, they followed the sound until they reached a clearing where a massive tree stood tall, its upper branches reaching into the sky like a watchtower. And there, unbelievably, entangled in fishing nets that had somehow been left behind, was a tiger. Not on the ground, in the tree. The majestic beast was hanging, awkward and distressed, its powerful legs caught and twisted in the thick mesh. It was exhausted, struggling just enough to move but not to free itself. Its amber eyes met theirs, full of confusion and silent pleas for help. Word spread fast. In a matter of minutes, villagers gathered near the tree, keeping a cautious distance. Some gasped, others just stood frozen. A few took out their phones, capturing the unreal scene, because who would believe them otherwise? A tiger, in a tree, trapped like a bird in a net. But soon the reality sank in. This animal was in serious trouble, and it needed help. Fast, authorities were called. Forest officials, wildlife vets, and rescue teams were contacted. Every second counted. The longer the tiger stayed suspended, the worse its chances were. The nets were not just holding it back, they were cutting into its flesh. The tiger was starting to bleed, and the weight of its body was adding strain. Its breathing was heavy. Eyes blinking slow. The adrenaline had started to wear off, and weakness was setting in. People were scared, but also determined. No one wanted to see this beautiful creature suffer. Even those who had grown up fearing tigers, knowing their power, their place in the food chain, felt an overwhelming sense of empathy. This was no longer a predator. It was a living being in distress. And that changed everything. As the rescue team finally arrived, the pressure mounted. The forest was growing hotter by the minute. The tiger was panting. Time was not on their side, but even with all the expertise and equipment, the rescue wasn't simple. Climbing a tree to free a wild tiger isn't exactly in the manual. They had to think fast, plan every move, and hope that the tiger would hold on just a little longer. Every creak of the branch, every twitch of the net, every small roar from the tiger added to the tension. There was no easy way to reach it. A tranquilizer might cause the tiger to fall and injure itself further. Climbing close without safety gear risked both the rescuer and the animal. It was a situation no one had trained for. The net, the height, the tiger's position. It was all so dangerously unpredictable. Still, backing down wasn't an option. The eyes of the entire village, and now the world through live streams, were locked on this moment. A plan started to take shape, but would it work? Could they stabilize the tiger without causing it more pain? Could they cut the net carefully bit by bit without triggering a panic? Could they lower it safely to the ground? There were more questions than answers, and with every minute the stakes climbed higher. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary, But before we dive into the rescue itself, before we reveal the courage and chaos that followed, let's take a step back. Let's understand how a tiger even ended up in such a bizarre and dangerous situation in the first place. What led it here? Was it chasing prey, running from something? Or did human activity unknowingly set this trap? You won't want to miss the twists and turns that brought us to this point, and the breathtaking moments that followed. Because when nature, human error, and bravery collide, the story that emerges is one you'll remember forever. To understand how things reached such a strange and intense moment, we have to look back just a few days before the tiger got caught. The forests surrounding the village were thick, wild, and full of life. Tigers had always roamed there, but they usually stayed deep in the jungle, far from human eyes. That balance, though, had started to shift. In recent weeks, the locals had noticed signs: broken branches, fading paw prints near water sources, livestock going missing without a trace. There was growing talk among the villagers that a tiger had wandered closer than usual. Some thought it was just passing through, but others feared it had been pushed out of its territory, maybe by younger, stronger males or by loss of prey. At the same time, monsoon season had left behind chaos, flooded trails, washed out animal paths, and tangled messes like the very fishing nets now strangling the tiger. These nets weren't meant to trap anything that big. They'd been tied up in the branches by some local fishermen who used the trees near water bodies to dry or store them. No one ever imagined they could turn deadly. But nature doesn't follow rules, and neither do wild animals. The tiger, likely, hungry, disoriented, and desperate, may have been following the scent of goats that graze near the edge of the village. No one saw it enter the area. No one saw it climb. But by some tragic twist, it must have leapt onto that tree either to get a better view or out of sheer panic, and in that instant, its powerful limbs got caught in the mess of thick nylon nets. Once it realized it was stuck, it probably struggled harder, making things worse. The more it fought, the tighter the net gripped its legs, its body, its tail. As the rescue operation continued, the tension among the crowd grew heavier. People who'd never spoken to each other were now gathered shoulder to shoulder, whispering prayers, some holding hands. Kids stood on shoulders to get a look. Forest officers barked instructions over radios. A vet prepared tranquilizer darts, but hesitated. One wrong move and the tiger could fall from the high branch and break something, or worse. Meanwhile, the villagers began to reflect. This tiger, they realized, was more than just a wild animal. It was a symbol of the changing times. Forests were shrinking. Food was harder to find. Human activity was creeping deeper into wildlife territory. This wasn't just a random accident. It was a sign of something bigger. The tiger had likely once ruled a stretch of forest farther in, but something had driven it here, to this unfamiliar tree, to this trap made by humans without even knowing it. Among the rescue team was a man named Ravi, a forest ranger who had grown up just miles from the village. He knew the forest paths like the back of his hand, had seen tigers before, even rescued a few cubs during floods. But this situation was new even for him. As he stood below the tree, helmet on, binoculars in hand, he felt the weight of every pair of eyes on him. But more than that, he felt the weight of the tiger's suffering. The animal didn't roar anymore. It just watched him, breathing slow, as if it knew he was there to help. Ravi had an idea, but it was risky. Instead of tranquilizing the tiger straight away, he proposed a small platform be built just below the net, using bamboo poles and ropes. That way, if the animal fell, it wouldn't crash to the ground. He convinced a few brave locals to help him set it up. They worked quickly, tying the poles together, balancing themselves on lower branches, sweat pouring down their faces, hands shaking not from fear, but from urgency. As this was happening, other angles of the story unfolded quietly in the background. One of the fishermen whose nets had been used in the tree watched from behind the crowd, guilt etched into his face. He never meant to hurt anything. Those nets were old, probably forgotten. He kept whispering to himself, wondering if it was his fault. Meanwhile, a young girl named Anaya stood with her grandfather, clutching a hand-drawn picture of a tiger she'd made in school. She looked up at the real thing, her eyes wide, heart full of worry, wondering why someone so strong and beautiful could look so helpless. And then came the moment. The platform was almost ready. The vet stepped forward again, dart in hand. The tiger shifted slightly, a low groan escaping its throat. Time was slipping through their fingers. Ravi gave the signal. The dart flew. It hit gently. The tiger flinched, but didn't roar. A hush fell over the crowd. Everyone held their breath. Would the sedative work fast enough? Would the tiger hold still long enough for the team to climb up and cut the nets? Would the branch give way under the weight? Below the tree, hearts pounded. Above, the tiger blinked slowly, its muscles starting to relax. The nets still wrapped tightly around it, each strand holding tension like a spring ready to snap. Ravi adjusted his harness, looked up one last time, and started to climb. The moment of truth was seconds away, and no one knew what was about to happen. Ravi's hands gripped the rope tightly as he climbed, each movement deliberate, careful, and silent. Below, the crowd barely breathed. Even the birds seemed to pause, as if the entire forest understood that something delicate and rare was unfolding. The tiger was slipping into a light sedation, its breathing slower now, body swaying slightly with the weight of the net. The bamboo platform beneath was finally secured, but it wouldn't hold forever if things went wrong. This was it, the point of no return. When Ravi reached the first knot, he took a moment to steady himself. One cut in the wrong place, and the net could shift suddenly, jolting the tiger or even snapping the branch it rested on. With quiet focus, he began to work through the layers of tangled rope. The net had looped around the tiger's back legs, belly, and one of its front paws. Its tail was pinned too. The tension in the cords told him that the animal must have struggled hard when it first got stuck. As he worked through each strand, he kept his eyes on the tiger's face. It was drowsy but watching. There was a strange calm in its gaze. Not fear, not aggression, just tiredness and maybe something that looked like trust. Ravi whispered gently, not really expecting the tiger to understand, but wanting to keep the moment grounded. "We're almost there, buddy. Hang in." Suddenly, one of the cords snapped loudly. The branch jerked under the change in weight, and the crowd gasped. The tiger groaned. Ravi's heart raced, but he stayed locked in. He reached for the last two ropes, the ones binding the tiger's front leg and chest. The most delicate cuts. One wrong move, and the tiger could fall sideways, off the branch before the sedative fully took over. He looked down once more. Everyone was looking up, mouths open, praying silently. Then, in one clean motion, he sliced through the final knot. The net unraveled slowly, like a snake loosening its grip, and the tiger's body sagged. For a moment, it looked like the animal might fall, but the bamboo platform held. The tiger landed gently on its side, a soft thump echoing through the forest floor. There was silence, and then cheers. Loud, emotional, overwhelming. People clapped, some cried. Anaya jumped up and down, her drawing still in hand, waving it like a flag. Even the fisherman who had been blaming himself allowed a small smile to escape. Relief washed through the crowd like a wave. But the work wasn't done yet. The rescue team moved fast. With ropes and a stretcher, they carefully secured the sedated tiger and lowered it to the ground. The vet checked its vitals, weak but stable. There were deep cuts from the net, bruises on its legs, but no broken bones. It would need care, rest, and time, but it would survive. They loaded the tiger into the rescue vehicle gently, wrapping its body to keep it warm and safe. It would be taken to the nearest wildlife center for treatment. As the engine started and the vehicle began to pull away, people waved. Some took final pictures. Others stood in thoughtful silence. The village returned to calm slowly, but something had changed. The story of the tiger had become more than just a rescue. It had opened eyes. People began talking about how close human life had come to wildlife. About how something as simple as a forgotten fishing net could become a deadly trap. There was growing conversation about forest boundaries, waste management, and the need to protect both animals and people. For Ravi, the moment stayed with him. He had looked into the eyes of a wild tiger and seen more than just a beast. He'd seen a creature that didn't belong in a net, didn't belong caught between human mistakes and survival. It deserved better.